So there are reports out there right now that there's a possibility that Paul George might actually go to or be traded to the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, we've heard many reports, especially since the Clippers lost in the first round, since Kawhi, went down with injury, Paul George not playing at all in the first round or any part of the playoffs. Injuries happen with this team more often than not. And now the trade rumors are definitely out there because a lot of fans are just sick of, the Kawhi and PG era in regards to, it not working out, and it's just resulting in injuries, and it's not, working in their favor. And I definitely understand that because, you want something to work out, especially if you put your everything into it. And a lot went into these two guys, and, nothing has came out of it in regards to a championship. So I definitely understand if anybody thinks that they need to be traded. I personally think maybe maybe they should just run it back. Since really there's no options for both parties. Of course, anybody would pick up Kawhi and PG in a trade, but it's like, with this team, I feel like they started something, and I feel like you got to do your best to finish it. And, who knows how this offseason is going to turn out for them. But either way, they didn't finish the job, and it's incomplete, and it's a failure. And, if they have an opportunity to run it back, I would, since, Steve Ballmer's opening up a new stadium and everything, for this team, a new arena and everything. And you definitely want great players in there instead of mediocre players. So, if they lose Kawhi and PG, or if they walk, they get nothing in return, and they open up a new stadium with no type of excitement in it. So, running it back wouldn't hurt either. But I definitely see where you're coming from if you do think somebody or one of the players need to be traded. And Paul George's name is in the forefront right now is because really, his injury really sparked a lot of questions, because it's like Kawhi was going in there by himself anyway in the playoffs against a three-headed monster like Phoenix. It's going to be tough on Kawhi, and a lot was going to have to be asked of Kawhi to do more because he didn't have Paul George. And it's another injury by Paul George at an unopportune time, and along with Kawhi Leonard as well, even though he did his very best in the playoffs. And the two games that Kawhi gave us, man, I can only imagine what he really would have looked like going forward if he stayed healthy. That type of Kawhi Leonard probably could have got them all the way to the finals by himself if he stayed healthy, because Kawhi was just on a tear, and his defense was masterful, as it always is, and he turns it up a notch in the playoffs. His body just couldn't sustain. But either way, there's been reports out about Paul George in the possibly being traded to the Memphis Grizzlies. And when I heard about these reports and read about them, the trade proposals were interesting, but I don't think they're likely. And the one trade proposal that I see or have saw was pretty much Paul George for Tyus Jones, Brandon Clark, and maybe Steven Adams and a couple picks. Now, personally, I think that's a very good trade only in regards to the depth that you're getting back. Now, the Clippers already have depth, so, I don't know, where those three guys would fit in with all the depth they already have. But, like I said, that would be some very good, key, valuable depth. Because now you would have a traditional point guard in Tyus Jones. You can let Russell Westbrook come off the bench if they decide to keep him. And then you got Brandon Clark, somebody who can get extra rebounds and who's pretty physical in the paint and who's very crafty and good at getting rebounds, offensive rebounds. He's good at that. And Steven Adams might be the best big man in the league in regards to getting offensive rebounds in the league. So, those are key components right there. And I definitely think those components will help you win a championship. So I like, the thought. I like the idea, but I don't think it's likely, because if the Clippers traded for Paul George, they might actually want a little bit more in return, for him. So to me, they would probably ask for somebody like Desmond Bane with maybe Steven Adams and a couple picks or something like that for Paul George, based upon the contract Paul George has, which is like superstar money, which, he pretty much somewhat is in a lot of people's minds. So that's fine, but they would have to make up for it somehow. But either way, no matter what trade clause or proposal, I still think that it's highly unlikely for it to happen because I don't think Memphis would go for that trade. And if anything, Memphis is trying to get more so rid of Dylan Brooks than anybody. So, I mean, I think they would try to include him in there, and I don't think the Clippers would even go for that because, I mean, he would be more of a distraction rather than a help because his game doesn't do the talking. It's just he does a lot of talking. So that really wouldn't work there. And I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, if they, if you heard more rumors about Paul George being traded, even more so than Kawhi. And it's not just because Kawhi is the better player on the team or the best player on the team. It's just the fact that when you think about Paul George and the way off P and all those things, he never shows up in the playoffs and all that type stuff. He did show up in the playoffs, the year before last when Kawhi went out and they went to the conference finals. That's the best I've seen Paul George, I think, in the playoffs in a long time. And so I can't really say he doesn't show up in the playoffs, but his injuries, along with Kawhi, just seem to happen at an unopportune time. And I feel like he's more the susceptible one to get traded since he's only there because of Kawhi Leonard, because Kawhi Leonard was the one that started this whole operation. So if anybody they're going to trade first out of the superstars, it might actually be Paul George since he was an add-on rather than the main guy coming to the team and recruiting. So, I mean, like Kawhi Leonard did. So, I mean, it's very possible for that to happen. And like I said, when I think about Paul George, it's one of those things where I personally, like I said, I would run it back if I were them with the two players they have. But if they're going to trade Paul George, they don't need to really just get, depth pieces because they already got a lot of pieces, a lot of depth on their team. They could just keep the pieces they have. So, I mean, if they were going to trade them, they definitely need to get back somebody with a little bit more offensive firepower and, somebody that can kind of make up for some of the scoring that he provides, not just, somebody like Steven Adams and them who's good defensively, but it doesn't make up for his offensive, arsenal. So, I mean, they need to get somebody more closer to that if they were going to make a trade. But as I said before, I think it's going to be a standstill. I think that, it more so might be a situation where, they just run it back on what they have and, see what their chances are like, going into next season because, like I said, there's not many options out there for the Clippers in regards to trades or getting other pieces. It's just the fact that, they, in most people's eyes, they have what they need. They're just not healthy enough to go out there and win it. So the Clippers just got to try to find a way to stay healthy and not worry too much about trades. And, as far as the organization, they're talking about, bringing everybody back and things like that. But we'll just have to see if that really happens. I know organizations say a lot of things, but definitely, regardless of who they bring back or not, I wouldn't be surprised if they did trade somebody like Paul George or not, because at this point, like I said, it's a failed season, so they got to make some moves somehow.